The next of our Chaos Detachment reviews is here, and this time we move from the Demon Engines of Avashtor to a much more rogue renegade element. This detachment focuses on a more generic set of units. The buff itself that you get in the detachment applies to basically everything in the Codex, but it really does reward you for moving hard and fast and going after those key enemy objectives. And the one we are looking at today is the Renegade Raiders Detachment. Very much themed like the old Red Corsairs, the Huron Blackheart led forces. This will be a detachment that you will love if you like all the chaos stuff, from bikers to legionaries to terminators to vehicles. As I said, practically everything in the Codex will be getting quite a lot from this detachment. The detachment rule itself is appropriately called Raiders and Reavers, and it brings you two very solid buffs. The first part is that all of your ranged weapons gain the assault rule, so now you really can run and gun and keep your entire army moving basically an extra 3d6 inches while still unleashing their full firepower into the enemy. And I mean, in 40k at the moment, movement is so important. So being able to move up, get onto objectives, get behind terrain for cover, or just get closer to the enemy and still shoot with all your guns is just so unbelievably powerful. But then it gets even better, because also when a Heretic Astartes unit attacks an enemy unit that is within range of an objective, you also get a +1 bonus to your AP, and this isn't just in shooting either. So not only will all of your firepower get that bonus AP, but when you are in combat and putting your melee attacks into an enemy unit and fighting over an objective, you will also be getting through their armor much more easily. And this rule is just going to be so impactful. It's going to be a huge buff, not only on things like your regular bolters and chainswords, but even up to stronger things like your power fists and your las cannons, and everything in between is going to feel so much more powerful and impactful going into enemy units on objectives, and just taking those objectives from the enemy now is going to be easier than ever before with this detachment. Turning even just a regular 5-man squad of legionaries with their bolt guns from strength 4 0 AP to strength 4 and -1 AP, let alone potentially doubling their movement each turn with the advance and still shoot, just makes them so much better. They can get into range more quickly, they can get line of sight on enemies that maybe thought they were hiding behind terrain, and they can just do more damage. 20 bolter shots with 0 AP compared to -1 AP into a standard marine profile basically gives you about 50% more damage. It does around 3 wounds rather than 2. And while that may not seem like much just in those numbers, you've got to remember this is across your entire army, across the entire game. When you are going after objectives, and that is obviously a big part of winning the game, you are going to be doing so much more damage across your army, and it really is going to add up as the game goes on. And then after you've shot into them, when you charge into combat again, that's just going to make your melee so much more powerful. Chainswords jumping to -2 AP is a big deal, and then getting -3 AP on your power fists means that things like Terminators are just going to melt through standard marine squads like absolute butter. So I really love this detachment straight off the bat. I think it's a great mix of mobility and also boosted damage output at range and in melee, and it means that with this army, with this detachment, you can play the movement game really well, you can play the ranged game really well, you can play the melee game really well, and of course you can play the objective game much more effectively, and it's just going to help you win more because of how all of the parts of this detachment interact. It's just going to help you win more. It's not quite as ostentatious or flashy as some of the other detachments, but getting assault and getting their extra AP are two very straightforward, very simple, very strong buffs to have. The enhancements are also rather good. Again, you get 4 of them, and they can all go on any Heretic Astartes model. So your lords, your sorcerers, your demon princes, they can all take these. The first up is Despot's Claim, which is a nice simple CP generating one. It is a bit better in my opinion than the one we saw the other day from the Soul Forged War Pack. Once again, you generate a CP on a 5+ in your command phase, but with this one you get +1 to the roll if you are wholly within 12 inches of the opponent's deployment zone. So unlike the Soulforged one, this doesn't rely on anything to trigger. You don't need to destroy an enemy unit for it to go off. It will always be there for you to roll on. You just get an extra buff, an extra chance at getting it if you are in the enemy deployment, which is quite nice. And again, it's nothing super reliable, but it could net you a few extra command points over the course of the game. So if you did want to get a few more stratagems off, this could be one worth considering. Dread Reaver is also very, very good. It gives you another buff that boosts, again, if you are wholly within 12 inches of the opponent's deployment. And if you are there, you get full rerolls to hit and to wound. Now, of course, this is a very strong buff to have. It is hindered somewhat, though, by being restricted to that enemy deployment zone. It's certainly doable in this detachment with the fact that you can basically always advance thanks to assault on your guns, but still it may take a couple of turns to get this one going. But when you are there, something like a Demon Prince with full rerolls to hit and to wound, not to mention the bonus AP against enemies near objectives, will be doing a huge amount of damage. And with their strike profile as a Khorne Demon Prince, they can on average one-shot a Gladiator tank when you factor in the sustained hits from the army rule too. So I think again, this is an enhancement that will be very good. It will be very useful. It is quite a significant buff. It just may take a couple of turns to really get the ball rolling on it and to start benefiting from it. Mark of the Hound is a really solid one for a Lord that is joining a unit. It grants the unit the Scout's 6-inch rule. So now if you put, say, a Lord with a jump pack with a squad of Raptors, they can now be starting the game 6 inches forward. Then they have their 12-inch move, so they can potentially quite easily get a turn 1 charge off if you wanted. And again, with that bonus AP, you could very reliably move up the board and steal an objective from an enemy right at the start of the game. So once more, this is a very straightforward, simple but potent enhancement. I do think it's kind of a shame there's no Lord on a bike anymore, because I think this would be really nice to put on a Lord joining a squad of bikers. But as it is, basically getting an extra 6 inches of movement thanks to Scout is a really nice bonus no matter what you're putting it on, and it really can help you get the game started on the right foot. So I think this is a very good one to bring in pretty much every list. There's going to be a use for it. Finally, we get to the Tyrant's Lash. This allows you to re-roll your advance rolls for the bearer and his unit, and also lets you fall back and still shoot. Obviously, with everything gaining assault, this is really solid for letting you get the most out of those advance rolls. You can turn those 1s or 2s into a much better result, which means you can much more easily get into range with your guns or get onto an objective. And then fall back and shoot is also a really strong buff. If you get tagged by an enemy unit trying to tie you up, or you are fighting a vehicle that's going to take you ages to kill, you can just retreat back from them and then still unleash a scary amount of firepower into them. So once again, I think this is a nice enhancement. It's straightforward, it's simple, it's nothing super flashy, but all of the enhancements here are good and they are solid, and they are just going to make your army do its role better. They're just going to make your army in general perform better. So they're all at least usable and in some way decent, and honestly I could see any combination of the 4 of them being considered in a multitude of lists just to add either some more mobility or some more damage output, or even just some more utility from getting the command points to however you are building your army. And then we get to the stratagems. Once again, we have 6, and once again, they are all really nice because they are all 1 command point. And actually, that's one of my favorite things about the detachments we've seen for Chaos so far. They are all such cheap stratagems, you really can make good use of them across the entirety of the game. None of these are super flashy, they are just good and useful and will just work to make your army overall better. Unfailingly Obdurate is the always useful Armor of Contempt style stratagem. It gives you -1 AP to enemy attacks that are targeting your unit. So this is fantastic. It's great in Marines, it's great here. It will go a long way to keeping your legionaries, your vehicles, your Terminators, basically anything alive that bit longer against enemy firepower. And this is a stratagem that you will probably be using every single turn when you have enemy firepower or attacks coming into your squads. Warp charged engines allows you to choose a mounted unit or a vehicle, so bikers or any of your tanks and whatnot, and instead of rolling your advance, you just get a flat 6. So now you can reliably know how far a unit is going to move, so if you needed to get a 3 or a 4 or a 5 to get onto an objective, you don't have to risk it anymore, you can just guarantee that 6, and of course you can still shoot thanks to the detachment rule. So again, nothing super flashy, but it is very useful. It's always going to be a solid thing to have in your back pocket, and when you need it, just if it's in the last turn of the game and you need that 3+ to get onto an objective, you never want to risk rolling that 1 or 2, so having a command point for this just guarantees that you can do what you need to do. Scour and Seize grants a unit precision in melee as long as it is fighting an enemy unit near an objective. This is possibly the most niche out of the bunch because precision as a rule is rather niche itself. But if you have, say, just charged a unit, maybe a load of Terminators, into an enemy unit with a character, and you really want that character dead, this will of course help you to do it. Being able to snipe out enemy leaders that are giving buffs or just scary themselves in melee, someone like Trajan Valoris, will definitely be a useful thing to do, and it can really be used well, this stratagem, to remove some of the durability or damage output that a leader may be bringing to a unit, or just to stop that scary character from being able to swing into your guys when the enemy fights back. So I think this one is not always going to be great, it's not always going to be useful, but once more, when you are on an objective and you are fighting an enemy unit and it's got a leader in that you want to kill, not only are you getting that extra pip of AP anyway, which is great, but using this to snipe out those enemy characters is going to be really handy to have. Ruinous Raid is next, and this is something similar to what the Marines get in their Firestorm Assault Force. It works on a unit that has just disembarked from a transport, but instead of +1 to hit like the Marines get, this one allows you, if you are targeting a unit near an objective, to re-roll your hit and your wound rolls. So in my opinion, it's just much better. It means with this stratagem, you can move a Land Raider up, for example. You can disembark 5 Terminators and a Lord in Terminator armor, and then they can still charge in and get full rerolls to hit and to wound. And what that means is that, not even counting any of the shooting they can do beforehand, this combo with a Chain Fist on one of the Terminators and a Chain Fist on the Lord can do around 21 damage to an Imperial Knight. So you could, with some previous shooting before you charge, quite reliably one-shot a Knight when you are near an objective with this unit. So this strat I think is very strong. It gives you 2 monumentally big buffs in reroll to hit and reroll to wound, and is just going to allow you to utterly take over an objective and wipe out anything that dares to stand near it. The next stratagem is Opportunistic Raiders. This is at the end of a fight phase. If you are not within engagement range of an enemy unit, you can make a 6-inch move or a 12-inch move if your unit is a mounted unit. So if you charged in and killed the enemy, you can now really capitalize on that win and move even further into enemy territory, or move onto an objective, or just fall back to make it harder for your enemy to charge next turn, or whatever you want. It's just going to be an extra little bit of movement, which is going to be really handy. If you are in combat when you use this stratagem, you can instead fall back. So again, this will allow you to fall back from a combat, and then also the cherry on top for this stratagem is that you can move back into a transport. As long as you haven't disembarked from a transport this turn, there is nothing stopping you from using this stratagem to move and get re-embarked on your Land Raider or your Rhino, so you can then in your next turn move off, drive off, and go cause a menace somewhere else on the battlefield. And what this really does is it makes your army and your force incredibly flexible and slippery, and it means your opponent is going to have a really tough time figuring out where they need to focus, where your army is going to be, and you can really control the flow and the ebb of the battle to get your units exactly where you want them to be to do the most amount of damage and make it really tricky for your opponent to kind of counter you. Finally, we have Reaver's Haste. This is used in your charge phase, and it allows an infantry or a mounted unit to charge if they've advanced. This is already a fantastic rule, seeing as you can also advance and shoot. You can now have a unit like Bikers or Raptors move up the board, shoot, and then still charge and get into combat incredibly quickly with the previously mentioned Mark of the Hound enhancement. A Lord with a squad of Raptors can be a genuine threat to pretty much anything on the board turn 1. They will have that 6-inch scout move, they will have their 12-inch move, d6 advance, and then still be able to charge after that. So it is very, very strong just based on granting something advance and charge. But again, there is a nice little cherry on top. If you are targeting a unit that is on an objective with your charge, you get +1 to your charge roll. So now it is going to be even easier for you to get a squad onto an objective, get that bonus AP on your attacks, and just wipe an enemy unit out and steal the objective from them. All in all, the stratagems are just great. They are all really useful. Some of them are a bit more niche than others, but they are all probably going to get used a couple of times over the course of the game, depending on what you bring. Obviously, if you don't bring any transports, you won't use the Ruinous Raid one, but like all of them can be useful for a like generic built army. And I think they are just all good as well. What I've said before across the entirety of this video is that there's nothing in here that is super flashy or over the top or exciting. It's just really good solid buffs to like basic mechanics and rules of the game that will make every unit you bring just do its job better and be more efficient for the points you play. And at the end of the day, that is just going to help you win games. And so that is the Renegade Raiders Detachment. As I said, I think this is just great. It's super strong. It's got rules that benefit basically your entire army in basically every phase of the game. You can bring any units that you like and that you want, and they will get some use out of this detachment. It is super thematic, it is super fun to play, and it's just good. If you want to run a raider-themed force with a load of Marines, a load of Bikers, and a load of Rhinos and other vehicles supporting them, and just put a load of pressure onto the enemy and then charge in and rip their objectives away from them, then I think this detachment will be absolutely ideal for you. It is just so fun, so straightforward, so simple, and to me that's what makes it so good. I personally think this may well be the best detachment in the book, just for how universally useful it is, and I think in this codex especially, it is just the most fun to play as well. But as always, what do you make of this detachment? I'd love to know your thoughts and ideas about lists down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.